您好，老师。
现在可以开视频，然后让我看你们的脸。啊，现在第一个视频，
你好，老师。
你好，
现在我用手机，所以我关视频，因为我没有电。
哦，好。
谢谢。
I want to tell you a story about a Chinese fish called Ji. Once upon a time, there was a fish named Ji. You can tell that it was a fish because it has a fish yu on the bottom, which means fish, and the name Ji on the top. You can see how the character for fish came from an original picture of a fish. The bottom part is the tail, and the middle part is the body, and the top part is the mouth. Actually, there were two fish named Ji. One was called Bai Ji, which means white Ji, and the other was called Hei Ji, which means black Ji. But one day they discovered that Ji was actually not a fish. They discovered that it was actually a pig named Tun. You can tell Tun is a pig because it has moon, or yue, which is really a stupid way to write ro, which means meat. The character for meat comes from a pictograph of ribs. You can see how in ancient times the character for moon looked a lot like the character for meat. You can see how it may have gotten confused. And it is a shi, which is a kind of pig on the side. Shi is the original character for pig. See how it changes from something that looks like a pig to the modern character? So they called the pigs Baiji Twin and Heiji Twin. Baiji Twin was very beautiful, so the Chinese called her Changjiang Yushen, which means the Yangtze River goddess. That's because she lived in the Yangtze River, which the Chinese call Changjiang, which means long river. But there were many bad people who killed the two Ji fish. This is Chi Chi. Chi Chi is the last of the Baiji twin. Doesn't she look cute? Chi Chi was a dolphin. Finally, not long ago, Chi Chi died. And now, no one will ever see a Baiji twin again. Heiji twin is now the only Ji in the river. In Chinese, Baiji twin and Heiji twin are both called Jiang twin, or river pigs, because they live in the river. You can see how the ancient character for water actually looks like water. You can see how it came to look like the modern character shui. Shui also means water. You can see how the ancient character also looks like water and how it came to look like three dots. The character jiang means river. It has the component shui on the side and the character gong on the right side. Gong comes from a carrying pole. It means to work. In ancient times, it was also pronounced the same as jiang, so it is a phonetic. In other words, in ancient times, it told you how to pronounce the character. This twin lives in the sea, so it is called a hai twin, or ocean pigs. You know, in English, we have two kinds of river pigs, a dolphin and a porpoise. Baiji twin is actually a dolphin. It is called the Yangtze River dolphin, or the Yangtze white-fin dolphin. Heiji twin is actually a porpoise, or a Yangtze finless porpoise. Now, I will tell you the difference between a dolphin and a porpoise. A dolphin has a long, pointed nose. A porpoise has a rounded nose. But where do the words come from? Porpoise comes from the word pork. You know, pork like a pig. Pork, or porcus, is the Latin word for pig. Porcus marinus means the pig of the sea, just like in Chinese. It got changed to porpoise because the French can't speak Latin, and there you have it. Did you know that most fish lay eggs? But dolphins and porpoises have babies, just like humans. Dolphin means womb in Greek. The Greeks must have thought that dolphins were quite strange, having babies just like people. But that is not strange at all, since dolphins and porpoises are both mammals, not fish. They breathe air out of a nose hole in the top of their head. Now, there are very few Yangtze porpoises left. It is possible that the last one may die, just like Chi-Chi. So I come here today to tell you a story about the black G and the white G, and I hope that everyone will do what is necessary so that you and your children and your grandchildren will someday be able to see a Yangtze River porpoise.所以，有不久以前，政府请我去一个地方演讲，因为在这边有一个海豚是快没有，所以我做了一个演讲关于海豚。So I gave this speech a while back. The government asked me to come and talk about porpoises and dolphins, and because we have a porpoise that lives in the Yangtze River that is near extinction, and so they're worried about it. We used to have a dolphin that lived in the Yangtze River, but it died out. 所以在中文里面很复杂。不久以前，中国人不知道那个海豚是呼吸的一个动物，他们不知道是一个哺乳动物，所以他们叫鲫。鲫是一种鱼，它们有白鲫跟黑鲫。你可以看那个左边的那个鲫是比较偏白色的，右边的鲫是偏黑色的。所以英文，那个左边的是Yangtze River Whitefin Dolphin，左边的是 Whitefin Dolphin， 右边的是Yangtze River Finless Porpoise。在中文那个 porpoise 跟 dolphin 我们没有分别分开。So in Chinese, the Chinese of old, they were not too clear about the fact that the porpoises and dolphins were actually mammals and not fish. So for a long time, they called them a kind of fish. In English, on the left, you see a white-fin dolphin. You can see it's gray, but it looks kind of white. On the right-hand side, we have a Yangtze finless porpoise. It's more of a dark color. It's a dark gray, but they call it black in Chinese. So in Chinese, they don't have a word for dolphin versus porpoise. They call them both either river pigs or ocean pigs, haituan or jiangtuan. Jiangtuan is a porpoise or dolphin that lives in the Jiang, which is a big river, and haituan is a porpoise or dolphin that lives in the ocean. 有没有问题？
没有问题，老师。
我说这个字读记。有的时候，如果你看一个 我这个上面的那个字读 G，那个是一个标音符号，跟那个字的意思没有关系。下面有一个鱼，有一条鱼，你可以看这个鱼，转体字还不知道是什么东西，可是从甲骨文你可以看得很清楚，是一条鱼。这个是每一个小孩子都知道，下面的状体字是一个火，可是上面的那个田就是鱼的身体，然后上面的那个人就是鱼的嘴巴，下面那四个点就是鱼的尾巴。So here we have a character. The top part is pronounced G. It's just a phonetic. It usually means since, but here it's just a phonetic. The bottom part is a fish, and that's one of the first ideographic characters that you learn. The bottom part has 4 dots, which usually means fire. The middle part means a field, but in this case, it actually comes from the body and tail of a fish. The top part usually means a person, but in this case, it's the mouth of a fish. So this is G. They originally thought that it was a kind of fish. 有没有问题？没有。
没有。
没有。
好。可是后来他们发现，这个不是一条鱼，是一个哺乳动物，所以他们觉得这个好像一个猪，所以他们叫豚。豚是一个古代的字，就是一个小猪，他们大概觉得很可爱。如果你看一个月字旁，这个大部分的是一个真正的是肉字旁，然后右边你可以看一个石，石是从猪的来源。现在我们很少用这个字石，可是有很多的字里面有这个图形，这个构件。So here's the difference. And you can tell that the one on the left is a fish. The phonetic is on the top and the fish is on the bottom. Sometime later, they discovered that it was actually a mammal, and they thought that it looked something like a pig. So twin means a little pig. You see on the left, you have the moon, which really comes from meat. And on the bottom, you have a character which we don't, it's a component in many characters. We don't usually say 是, but it means pig. It's an old character for pig. So 在这边我分析，我解剖这个吞这个字，上面周边，如果你看那个月字旁，有很多的字，就几百个字，周边有月字旁。可是这个月字旁不是一个月，这是一个肉的来源。你可以看那个转体字，转体字的肉跟月很像。甲骨文的肉跟月也是很像。肉是什么来源？肉是一个肋骨，肋骨就是 ribs. So I think in every case, if you see a moon on the left-hand side, it actually comes from meat. And you can see by looking at the seal characters that the character for meat and the character for moon were very, very similar. In fact, they've always been similar. The character for moon, of course, looks like a moon, but the character for meat actually comes from ribs. And you can see in some cases it kind of looks like ribs. The character on the right is not only a phonetic, it is also a semantic. 在右边的那个不就是一个表音符号，这个不是一个表音符号，这是一个表意符号。它读是，你可以看它是一个猪。你看现在的字不像一个猪，状体字可能比较像一点点。然后如果你一直演变到甲骨文，你可以看是一个猪。所以你可以看那个猪的尾巴，猪的尾巴跟狗的尾巴的分别是，猪的尾巴是往下，一个狗的尾巴是往上面的。So on the right-hand side, you have a character that, in most cases, if you have a Rhodes-Zipong on the left, the thing on the right is usually a phonetic. But in this case, it's pronounced sh, and it means pig. It's hard to see the pig from looking at the modern character, but if you trace it back to the seal character and the bronze character and the oracle character, you can see that it looks like a pig. The difference between a pig and a dog, they look very similar in oracle characters. A pig's tail is curved down and a dog's tail is curved up. So twin, it means baby pig. Any questions?
没有老师。
Okay. 在中国大部分的人，他们会听过一个白鳍豚，白鳍豚是比较有名的，黑鳍豚不是那么有名的。中国人都知道白鳍豚是死掉了，最后的白鳍豚是死掉了。英文那个叫 Yangtze River White Dolphin。可是现在还有一个江豚是黑鳍豚，在这边你看不清楚，可是它的背后的那个，你看左边的，它的背后有一个fin，右边的没有。So if you say Baiji twin, most Chinese have heard of that. They know that it is an extinct dolphin or porpoise. It's actually a dolphin. Many Chinese have not heard of the Heiji twin, but it still exists in the Yangtze River. On the left-hand side, you see on the back, there's a dorsal fin. And so they say the white-finned dolphin. You can't see it very clearly, but on the right-hand side, on the black finless dolphin, it has no dorsal fin, or almost no dorsal fin. So they call it a finless porpoise. 所以在这边，在周边，你可以看一个江豚，它的名字叫七七。七七，你可以看有一个水字旁，水跟水有关系。然后在右边有一个标音符号，叫七。七七是有不几年以前，不久以前，我忘记了1907年他死掉。他是最后一个白鸡豚，最后一个白鸡豚。所以他们做一个邮票，白鸡豚的邮票在右边。它是那个 Yangtze River Whitefin Dolphin。因为那个时候有小孩子，他们说我要跟他们讲江是一个很大的一条河，强江的意思是很强的一个江，强江英文叫Yangtze River，所以它的周边你可以看一个水字旁，在汉字里面有2种水。在周边的我们说的那个是3点水，因为它看得起来好像是3点。在500多个字里面，你可以看这个3点水在周边。如果你看转体字，你可以看一个符号，好像水。我们有另外一个水，单独的水在右边，它的转体字你可以看得出来非常明白的，好像水。如果你详细的看，你可以看它的演变，它怎么样变成到现在的水。So this character Jiang, it means a very large river. We have several characters for river. We have Jiang, He, Xi. They all mean, Xi means creek, He means river, but Jiang is a very large river. And you see 2 characters that mean water. On the top left, we have the character. We often, in Chinese, we call it a sandian shui, which means a 3-dot water, because when it got simplified, it looks kind of like 3 dots. If you look at the seal character, you can see that it looks like water. And on the right, we have the actual character for water. The seal character looks quite a bit like water, flowing. And if you study it, you can see how it got transformed into the modern character for water. The character on the left, Sandian Shui, or 3-dot water, there are over 500 Chinese characters, common Chinese characters, that have what we call shui zipang, or water on the side. Most of them are the names of lakes and rivers, or oceans. On the bottom, we have a gong. It's a phonetic. The river is pronounced jiang, but the phonetic is pronounced gong. In Chinese, in ancient times, those 2 were pronounced the same. The gong means to work, and it's actually a carrying pole. The top and the bottom are, if you look at it sideways, people put stuff, Chinese would hang stuff on a pole on both ends and carry it around. So that means work. So Jiang Tun means river porpoise, or actually river porpoise or river dolphin, because Chinese don't know the difference. 有没有问题？有没有意见？
没有。
没有。So now I explain the difference between a dolphin and a porpoise. In English, we have two words, but these things are very similar. So the Chinese do not have two words. We have two words in English because one comes from Greek and one comes from Latin. The Baijituan, or Yangtze River white dolphin, they usually call it a jiangtuan. And the the Yangtze finless porpoise, or Agituan, they usually call it a Shujiangtuan. Shujiangtuan basically means porpoise, but you shouldn't take the word too seriously because probably most people don't know the difference. In fact, most people don't know the difference in English. I guess I didn't mention the difference. The dolphin has a pointed nose, and the porpoise has a blunt nose, a nose like a whale. 这个叫舒张吞，舒张吞是可以说是 porpoise， 可是可能很多的中国人可能不知道分别。porpoise 这个字从什么地方来的？这个是一个英文字 porpoise， 可是中国人说它是一个海豚或是一个江豚。In English, we might say a river porpoise or a marine porpoise, because some porpoises live in the river, some live in the sea. But it's interesting, the word porpoise actually comes from the word pork, which means pig. In Latin, the word for pig, 拉丁话那个我们说豚这个字是叫 porcus. In Latin, the word for pork is porcus, which means pig. 拉丁话我们说海豚 or 海鼠豚，鼠海豚。我们拉丁话叫 Porcus marinus. Porcus marinus, the ocean pig. 可是这个 porpoise 好像是从法文来的，那个 OISE， 法国人不会拼英文字，所以这个他们有的时候也讲错了。所以这个 porpoise， 这个大概从法文来的，应该说是 porcus 或是 pig。我觉得这个很有意思。所以 porpoise 是拉丁话，本来是拉丁话。然后我们看这个 porpoise， 它的鼻子很不是尖尖的。我们有另外一个字，这个江豚，江豚这个英文字不能说是 dolphin， 因为江豚也可能是一个 porpoise， 也可能是一个 dolphin， 所以中文不是很清楚的。可是这个白鳍豚，你看这个图片，这个它是一个 dolphin，dolphin 是有一个很长的鼻子。这个是从希腊文来的 ，dolphin 是子宫的意思。子宫这两个字 你可以看是小孩子的字，然后宫这是 palace 的意思，所以这个是小孩子住的地方。小孩子住的地方在子宫里面，所以子宫英文我们说是 womb。So you look at this character for dolphin, it comes from Greek. It means womb. Why does it mean womb? Well, the Greeks realized very early on that it wasn't a fish, that it had a uterus like a woman. In Chinese, you may notice that the uterus, the word uterus comes from two words. The first is child, and the second is palace. So in Chinese, the word uterus means child palace. That's where the child lives for the first 9 months. So 子宫。所以 dolphin 它有一个很长的鼻子。Jiangtun 我们可以说是一个 river porpoise 或是 river river dolphin。所以有的时候一个中文字或是一个英文字，有的时候是不容易翻译，因为在不同的语言，一个字它们不一定是一对一。所以江豚，在英文我们说 dolphin 或是 porpoise，我们不会说是它就在海里面的或是江里面。可是中国人他们觉得就在海或是江是最重要的，所以他们会说江豚或是海豚。Okay, any questions or comments?
没有。
所以最后一页，我们说这个白鳍豚，这个是死掉的那个 Yangtze River whitefin dolphin 有长鼻子 ，whitefin 它是白色的，它的背后有一个 fin，然后有另外一个是黑鳍豚，它是比较黑色的，它的后面没有一个鳍。英文它叫 Yangtze River Finless Porpoise，它是一个 porpoise，因为它没有鼻子。Okay, so any questions or comments?
没有老师。
Okay, so we have got 10 more minutes left in the first half of the class, so let's have question and answers. How many people have ever seen a dolphin or a porpoise? How many people have ever swum with a dolphin or a porpoise?
I was lucky enough. I live in Constanza. They have a dolphinarium. I was just seeing the dolphin yesterday.
Oh, you saw a dolphin yesterday. Oh,
Yeah.
did you swim with it?
No, they don't allow swimming with dolphins right there.
啊，所以它是一个 dolphin 或是一个 porpoise？
She's a dolphin.
是一个 dolphin。
海豚。
海豚。哦，有没有别的人有跟海豚或是江豚有关系？在美国，我们有一个东西叫 manatee， 有没有人听过 manatee？
没有听过老师。
一个 manatee 比一个海豚
我们的
听不到。
海豚是中国来的。
海豚是全世界都有。 海豚有很多的地方都有。这
但
两
是罗马尼亚的海豚是中国来的，因为我们
Ada.
卖
Apa di depan?
这个海豚。
Loh, kenapa kamu tinggalin? Teriak dari sini nanya.
有人讲话可以，如果有意思，如果要说话，你可以说话；如果不要说话，可以关闭你的麦克风。Yes, dolphins. The two Chinese dolphins, the two Chinese jiangtun, as far as I know, they only live in the river. Worldwide, there are different kinds. Some live in the river, some live in the ocean, some live in both
Yeah.
places. I have a question. Can a dolphin or porpoise drink salt water? 有一个海豚会不会喝盐水？
他们没喝盐水，
They can't drink salt water?
他们没喝盐水，他们只有这个办法，他们
Halo.
喝水。
Halo. Taruh HP-nya. Cari es krim no. No, Halo, ini temennya nih.
Yo no hablo español.
Kenal enggak? Aduh, kok garuk-garuk. Kenal enggak?
Yo no hablo español.
Kasih gula. Ini dia di dalam.
不好意思，老师，我不听见。
Somebody has their microphone on.
Yeah.
So, is anybody a scuba diver? 有没有人潜水？有没有人？你们都会游泳吗？
不
有没有
会，
人会？
我会了，
不
老师
不会？你会？
会，老师
在美国有一个东西叫 manatee， 你可以叫一个 manatee。T1
A 这个吗？
老师，
啊？
我刚刚在网上在 Google 查了，原来那个海豚他们是不喝那个海水的。
不喝海水啊，所以这个奇怪，他们必须要叫淡水。很有意思。So, I'm wondering where the marine porpoises find their drinking water. I'm trying to find a picture of a manatee, but I don't know how to spell it. And Baidu is too stupid to correct my spelling. You know Baidu and Google? You know, in China, you need VPN.
我知道。
我知道。
Just use it。
我知道，老师
我们这里一般都用
这
Google。
个吗？你等一下
啊对
地图，点一下图片。嗯， OK，我不知道。
我现在找不到。一个 manatee 在我们美国有 manatee，它们比海豚还大。也许就我们熟悉的时候，我可以找到一个 manatee。So anyway, so how many other people have swum in the ocean? 有没有人是游泳在海里面的？
我有
谁有？
我有过老师，
哦，你这个
游泳在海边，哎呀，
在海边是游泳过，
哎呀，
我
很好。
试过的是 snorkeling 老师。
snorkeling，对 snorkeling 这个很好。我现在住的地方，我现在住在南京，我离长江不远。
我住
长江
在工厂的，我住在附近黑海，
哦
所
，yeah，
以我常常可以看一看海豚。
对，你大概离地中海不远。
你可以说一遍？
You are not far from the Mediterranean Sea.
No, hey, hi, Black Sea,
Oh, Black
Black
Sea.
Sea,
Oh,
Black Sea,
okay.
hey, hi,
Oh, 黑海，对，黑
hey,
海。
hi.
So the Black Sea. Yeah, so you know they sank a ship in the Black Sea not long ago.
老
我知
师，
道，
老师，
Yes.
那个我在谷歌搜索了那个 manatee，我发在那个聊天窗口，是不是那个呢？manatee
对，你给我 manatee 给我看。
不是，
聊天
他怎么了
窗口。
？OK，好的。这个吗？
对
叫 manatee。
对，manatee。
对，你
manatee。等一会儿我给大家看。
manatee。哦，
你们会不会看到？这个是一个 manatee。
可以的。
那这个 manatee 大概是3米、4米，差不多4、5米，它很大。This is a manatee. They are probably about 12 feet long, and so they're very large. And one day I was swimming in a river in Florida. The river was very murky. I could not see anything, and I thought I was standing on the ground. But then the ground moved, and actually I was standing on a manatee. So I dove down to see what was on the ground, and I was standing on the back of a manatee. 他们很有意思，他们很有意的。我以前的时候在 Florida，我潜水，然后我以为我站在地上，可是那个地是移动的，然后我发现我是站了在一个 manatee 的背后。可是他们非常好，非常有意的。They are very friendly. This is one of my favorite animals. If you come to America, you can come and swim with the manatees. They also breathe air. 它们也是哺乳动物。好，现在我们休息10分钟。
好
E
的，
means
老
to
师。
cut in Chinese. 5 means 5 in Chinese. There are several characters whose components are simplified to U or E. B092, Chu, means district. B034, Gang, means ridge. B033, Feng, means wind. B068, Lu, means salt. A323, Zhao, means a family name. B121N, E, means generosity. From I or Wo and sheep Yang, it is changed to E for the pronunciation, but they add a Chu as a modifier. X is a Roman numeral for 10. It is also the 22nd letter of the Latin alphabet. XX are Roman numerals for 20. In English, we call this letter X. If there are two of them, we say they are two X's. In Spanish, if you have two X's, we call it dos X. In Mexico, they have a kind of beer called Dos X beer. They started making it in 1897, which was almost the beginning of the 20th century. So they called it Siglo Dos X, which means 20th century beer. As the century got older and the Mexicans got drunker, they just started calling it Dos X. In 1895, they invented the X-ray. The Chinese had trouble pronouncing X, so they called it I Ke Si Guang, which means I Ke Si Ray. The Chinese called it I Ke Si because they did not know how to say or write X. So in Chinese, you have to learn 3 complicated characters just to write an X. After about 100 years, the Chinese figured out how to write an X. So now they call it X Guang, pronounced I Ke Si Guang, which means X-ray. Anyway, they are getting better. More recently, we had the Windows XP operating system. The Chinese were still having problems with the X, so they called it 叉 P 操作系统, which means the Cross P operating system, or Windows 叉 P. Some Chinese started referring to X-rays as 叉 Guang, but the doctors told them this was not right. Finally, the Chinese fixed that problem by getting a better X-ray called a CT, for computer-aided tomography. Now Chinese have no trouble saying CT. Chinese teachers like to give a lot of tests. They like to mark all kinds of stuff all over your paper. They mark the correct ones with what in English is called a check mark. The Chinese call it a go, which means hook. Go usually means something is correct, but not always. Cha usually means something is wrong, but not always. In Chinese, we have 2 kinds of X's already. Look carefully, and maybe you can see the difference. U, which means 5 in Chinese, and E, which means to cut in Chinese. You may not have noticed that on the second stroke, one is curved up and the other is curved down. It is very important when memorizing your 10,000 Chinese characters that you pay attention to detail like this. Otherwise, people may think that you are illiterate. Cha is what a teacher writes on your paper when you get something correct. Cheng means multiplication, and Ike Si means X. E is the modern word for cut and represents the original character E. The knife, dao, indicates to cut. Sha means to kill, from remnant pin, from millet shu, and the cutting action E, subject to simplification rule B094 and font rule F045. In reality, this character seems to come from earlier characters where there is a weapon cutting off the head of a man. You can see how the character is related, and the earlier one may be the actual origin of this character. Yao is a divination symbol, from 2 scissors E. 帮忙按这个。好，今天有很多的，这堂课是很丰富的，我觉得，虽然就是2个构件，可是还是很丰富。这个，所以你看，上面有一个 e， 然后这个物，1、2、3、4、5的物，在右边也有好像一个 e， 可是是另外一个写法。有一个是有一撇，有一个是有一捺。So we have 2 characters here, both of them look kind of like an X. One is pronounced E, and it means to cut, basically. And the other comes from the number 5, which is pronounced U. And you'll notice that they're written differently. One of them has the line sloping down, the other has a line sloping up. So you can look at these carefully. And these are 2 different ways you're supposed to write Chinese characters. This is what irritates foreigners. It makes it kind of hard sometimes. 有一个字，有一个很有名的字叫 "e"， 英文我们说是 generosity。本来是一个羊在上面，然后一个我在下面，它简化变成一个 e， 然后有一个点。你可以想，然后你可以想它是简化的规矩 B-E-R-E， 是做一个新的汉字。So we have a common character in Chinese. It's pronounced E, and it means generosity. It consists of a sheep on top and a 我 or me on the bottom. It got simplified, and the logic was that they took the character E and they added an extra dot to it. Now, this is something that Chinese do sometimes when they want to simply modify a character to indicate that it's pronounced like that character, but it actually means something else. So the simplified character for generosity is just that kind of an X pronounced E, and it has a dian or a dot indicating that it means something else. So it means generosity. The simplification rule is B121, and the N means that it created a new character. Chinese, they will tell you that the simplification of Chinese created no new characters. That's not true. This simplified character never existed in any dictionary before the simplification. 我们有一些字，它们简化的方法是把里面的一个比较复杂的东西变成一个 e。比如说，有这个字"出"，这个是一个城市里面的小区或是小地方，它简化把3个口变成一个 x， 或是变成一个 e， 变成一个5。第2个字是港，它是一个山上的一个地方，英文叫 ridge， 它是把里面的东西变成一个 x。然后，另外一个是风，它们那个里面的东西它变成一个 x。有另外一个字就叫铝，它是盐的意思，英文叫 salt， 它把里面的东西变成一个 x。然后有很多的，在中国有很多的人姓赵，他们把这个右边的小变成一个 x， 所以有1、2、3、4、5个字， 5个字，他们把里面的比较复杂的东西变成一个 X。这个是一个中国人简化的一个方法。So we have 5 characters that simplify something inside, which is a little more complicated, to something that is less complicated, like an X. We have the first character, chu, which means a district, like part of a city. And the 3 kos are simplified to an X. We have the word gang, which means a mountain ridge, and the thing inside is simplified to an X. We have the word for wind, which actually comes from a sail and some insects. Chong. It gets simplified to an X. Then we have the character for salt. That thing inside the character is supposed to be salt, but it gets simplified to an X. We have a lot of people in China, and their family name is Zhao. And on the right-hand side, we have something that is pronounced Xiao, which indicates the pronunciation, but it gets simplified to an X. So we have 5 rules that simplify different things, actually 6, that simplify different things to an X. Any questions or comments? No? Okay, I wonder if any of you guys in the rest of the world know about Dos Equis. How many people have heard of Dos Equis? Anybody? Any Americans here? Europeans have not heard of Dos Equis? And Indonesians probably not? Indonesians don't drink beer, right?
有的有，有的没有。
哦，有的有，有的没有。好。所以在美国，我们有一个很有名的啤酒，是墨西哥来的，叫 Dos Equis。在罗马那个 X 就是10的意思，2个 X 就是20个意思。英文我们说 X。如果是2个，或是3个，我们说 X's。可是，在西班牙话，如果是2个，他们说 Dos Equis。所以这个是一个很有名的啤酒，在美国，从墨西哥来的。对，这个我会去。这个啤酒的故事是很有意思。这个啤酒的故事是1895年开始，好像1895年是第19世纪，可是快变成第20世纪。So the story of Dos Equis is kind of interesting. It was invented, they started it in 1895, which was the end of the 19th century and almost the beginning of the 20th century. So the 2 X's means 20th century beer. So it was called Siglos Dos Equis. But they kept drinking it for 100 years, and now it's just called Dos Equis. And now it's the 21st century. So the story is kind of interesting. Now there's some things that Chinese have it's really difficult for them to say. In the West, we have an alphabet, And if we come up with a foreign word, we kind of spell it the best we can. Chinese don't do that. When Chinese come up with a new word, they try to mix a bunch of Chinese characters together that are supposed to sound like the foreign word. So in 1895, they invented the X-ray. And the Chinese decided we can't just say X. We have to say 埃克斯. That's in Chinese, when you translate a foreigner's name, it really gets murdered. Like my name is Richard Sears. They translate it Li Cha De Sears, which is terrible. I hate it. And so if you read a newspaper, it's very difficult. If you could read a newspaper in Chinese and you're reading about some foreigner, it's the first time you see their name, it's usually rather difficult to figure out what their name is. Like Washington is Washington. Anyway, X-ray is 埃克斯光. And so 你要学3个新的汉字才可以拼 X。中国人如果发生一个外国的一个新的外国来的字，他们没有字母，所以对中国人来说是非常不容易。如果你是个外国人，你可以用你们的字母是拼一个外国的字，然后大部分的时候是还是可以听得懂。可是中国人他们要把一些汉字要连在一起，然后要说，要模仿那个外国的一个字。所以英文我们就是说 X， 可是中国人他们要变成埃克斯，很烦恼的。我的英文名字叫 Richard Sears， 我知道这个对一个中国人很难读，可是他们翻译我的名字 Richard， 他们翻译理查德，然后 Sears 他们翻译希尔斯，很讨厌。可是如果你要学 X 光 X-ray， 你要学新的3个新的字，埃克斯光。所以有的时候我要讽刺中国人。不久以前，有几年以前，他们有一个操作系统叫XP， 可是因为 X 他们已经过了100多年，中国人还不会说 X， 所以他们看那个 X， 他们现代的中国人，他们以为好像看得出来好像一个叉，这个是叉子的叉，可是读的跟叉一样，所以他们说是叉 P 操作系统，然后他们不会说 XP， 他们说叉 P， 然后他们觉得这个埃克斯光太复杂，所以变成有的人开始说叉光，可是医生说这个不行，烦恼的。所以他们发生一个新的 X 光的方法叫 CT，CT 英文叫 Computer Aided Tomography， 这是用电脑做图形。所以现在中国人不是要说测光或是 X 光，他们可以就是说 CT。So even though it's been 100 years and Chinese still can't say X-ray, up comes the XP operating system. And Chinese had another problem because they couldn't say XP. So they called it Cha P. Cha is the kind of X they mark on the paper when you get something right. So they called it the Cha Pi 操作系统 or the Cha Pi operating system. And then the young people started changing the name of X-ray. They called it a cha guang. And the doctor said, no, no, no. You have to call it an ikasi guang or an X-ray. But then more recently, we don't have X-rays anymore. We have CTs, which means computer-aided tomography. So now Chinese can say CT no problem. 所以差别叫做系统。中国人跟日本人，如果你做一个考试，他们有的时候会给你一个 go， 英文我们说 check mark。可是你不知道这个是错的或是对的，然后他们会把全部的问题，问题他们都会给你一个 go 或是一个 x， 有的时候是 go。日本人大部分的时候是，如果是英文就是一个错误，如果是中文就是对的。这个构件中文叫 go， 这个是大部分是对的，可是有的时候是错的。So in China and Japan, we have a kind of a problem. Chinese and Japanese like to use a whole lot of red ink. I have some pictures here. Well, I have some pictures on my other computer. One of a test that has all of the answers marked with an X, and the student got 100% right. The other was all of the answers were marked with an X, and the student got 100% wrong. So we have this problem in Chinese. We don't know whether the go means something is correct or not correct. We have another cha. It usually means that something is correct. That's just a kind of a special X. So we actually, when you look at what people write, there's 5 kinds of X's. There's a U and an E. And when Chinese write a cha, actually that should be cha, not E. The third one should be cha, not E. And then we have a multiplication sign. And then we have a regular X. So you can think about this. Are they 5 different symbols, or are they one symbol or 2 or 3? But actually the way people write it, there are 5 different ways to write an X. So any questions or, oh no, we're not done yet. Any questions or comments?
很有意思，老师。X-ray 很有意思的故事。
谢谢。所以我们有一些字里面有这个 e， 有一个是有一个 e， 有一个到，这个也是读 e， 也是切的意思。有另外一个字读咬，这个字不常看，可是这个跟易经有关系的。这个是2个 e。有另外一个字是常常看到，你看现代的简体字跟繁体字。那如果你看它的来源，你可以看上面是一个 e， 所以这个是简的意思。上面有一个树，树是 millet 的意思，它是有 millet 的来源，所以 现代的汉字最近的2000年，如果你看繁体字，你可以看一个手，一个书。最近的2000年，这个是虾的意思。然后，中国人说这个是一个刀子，是切掉那个树的头，所以这个是代表虾仁的虾。可是我们分析古代的汉字，我们发现这个来源可能是完全不一样。我们发现那个兽跟公主，这是一个一个武器，然后那个树，这是一个人跟他的头，所以这个是一个武器割了人家的头。这个是不是每一个人都同意，可是可能是。So we have the character E, and it means to cut. It's not a common character, but it has the component E, which indicates both to cut and it also indicates the pronunciation. On the right, we see a knife, which also indicates to cut. We have the character Yao, which is not a common character, unless you do the I Ching. I'm sure most of you have heard of the I Ching. It consists of two symbols for cutting, I. And we have another common character which means to kill. It's pronounced Sha. And you can see the simplified character and the traditional character. They have an extra dot on the traditional character. The top part is pronounced E, and it means to cut. In the simplified character, the bottom part is pronounced Pin. Notice that it's not the same as a mu tree. It's got a hook on the bottom. The traditional character is a mu, or a tree, but it has an extra dot. And if you actually look at the older character, it comes from something pronounced shu, which means millet. In America, we don't have millet. Very uncommon. In China, millet is very popular, especially millet gruel. Anyway, the philosophy, for 2,000 years, the story has been that the word for to kill or murder means cutting off the top of the millet head. More recently, it appears that the actual origin comes from a weapon which is cutting off a person's head. So these are today's characters. Any questions or comments? 有没有意见或是想法? Okay, so let's have questions and answers and maybe talk about these characters.
我可以找到一个故事，是英语的故事，但是我觉得很有意思。如果我给我1分钟，我可以送你。
1分钟。
一个故事，关于一的字 ，generous riches, that one. If you give me 1 minute, I can find it for you.
好。一个故事关于一个 leader。对。你要讲一个故事给我们听，对不对？ 大家去讲一个故事。Alexandra。OK， 有没有别的人？现在大概 Alexandra 去教一个故事。有没有别的人要讲什么问题？今天的字，或是有其他的问题，或是要跟我说一个故事？How about millet? 树。Do you have millet in your country? In Africa, I'm sure they have millet. And in America, we don't have millet. In China, they have lots of millet. Shu. How about Europe? Ojo. 这个是几点过
9:40。
40. So nobody knows what millet. Everybody knows what millet is.
不知道，
不知道，或是你知道？不知道吗？ Well, you can millet. 树，这个可以
怎么了？
加到一个图片。
它是一个什么
它是一种
植物？
对。好，millet 可以叫英文 MILIT。
这个吗？
这个不对。
不是
好
谷子是一种植物，叫谷子。
我没有办法找到老师，
没有关
不好
系。
意思，我没有办法找到。老师，我有一个问题，这个考试的时候怎么办？
考试的时候。
考试的时候，下个星期一我给你考试，对不对？下个星期一，对。然后你可以有几天做考试，然后星期四我们说那个考试。
不好意思，老师，现在很巧
Okay, somebody has their mic on. 有人有那个麦克风关掉。
那个，
对，
就孔维娟同学，你开车的时候不用上课，没事。要不你好好开车吧。He's driving， 就是 tell him， 就是说你可以看的 video， 就是你可以不用开车的时候上课。
对。不要关掉你的麦克风。
不是。
你可以开车，可是不要关掉麦克风。
He's driving and he looks。
这个没有关系。对，这个可以。
这很危险。
如果你可以开车，然后看我没有关系。No，好，要是安全第一。中国人说安全第一，不要一边开车一边听我的话。可是我现在给你看 millet， 这个有没有？可以看到吗？
可以看到，可以。
所以这个是 millet。在中国，我们早上会吃这个。有没有别的？所以这个 millet 只是一种食物，在 中国女人特别喜欢吃millet，
北方人喜
北方人也喜欢。对。So any other questions or comments about China or Chinese characters?
老师，那个 millet 是不是小米啊？中文是不是叫小米？
小米，对，小米。这个叫小米。在美国我们没有。有我刚刚说的那个 manatee，中文叫海牛，这个叫水牛，
海牛。
海牛叫海牛。在中国我们有海牛，这是 manatee， 水牛这是 water buffalo， 吹牛这是 brag。Anybody have any more? So I don't have any more videos, so let's get some questions or stories. Anybody have stories about Chinese? We have lots of Chinese going to Africa. Sometimes we hear bad stories about those Chinese. If nobody has any comments or stories, we can get out of class early. But anybody have any questions about China? 这个有没有？
老师要问一下那个关于考试，星期一你给我们考试，然后我们有几天的我们有多长时间把那个考试做完？
3天。
好的，老师，因为星期一我们也有考试。
哦，
就是你什么时候做都 OK。
你
老师
是没
就像那个 email，
这个
像
考试
上题发给你
星期
email。
一可以
对，对，你可以，你有3天，这3天你都可以，你不需要马上做。
老师，下个星期四还有课吗？
还有课，下个星期四我可以跟你说那个考试的答案。
好，
好，
所以我们1月1号有考试，老师。
1月1号，这个是什么时候？我不知道，这个是
1月1号，7月
8月。我不懂你说什么。
Oh, I asked when we have exams because on Monday we also have another exam about Chinese intermediate class.
Well, I will give you an exam by email, and you have 3 days to finish it.
Okay, 谢谢。
Yeah. Don't worry. My exams will be hard unless you listen carefully. You'll have to look them up. Maybe. Okay, any other questions or answers or stories? No? Okay, in that case, I guess we'll get out of class early unless you have any questions. 下课吗？好，我们下课。